Morning, guys. Today we're going to be looking at a very basic understanding of absolute value. I guess the introduction of absolute value. First, we're going to look at a question 5 subtract 6. What is the answer? Hopefully you said -1. If not, I think you have to go back a few lessons. But look, 5 take away 6 equals -1. What happens if I change the question slightly and I say 5 meters take away 6 meters? Well, you might first of all say the answer is -1 meter. But then you might go, hold on. How is it possible to have a negative distance? Obviously, distance is length. So if you have a length less than 0, no, that's not going to really work out. It kind of doesn't make sense. And sometimes these numbers don't make sense. I might say something like 15 seconds take away, let's say 30 seconds. Likewise, you might say, oh, that's -15 seconds. But I'm not sure about you. I know I can't go back in time, and I'm probably certain you can't either. It's impossible to have negative time. So in this case, these two numbers here, although it's possible to have a negative number, these actual numbers that we've got don't have too much meaning. It doesn't really make sense. But sometimes what we can do instead, we can look at it a little bit different way. What we can look at is its distance away from the origin. So for example, that's my 0 meters, I guess. If I'm at -5, I'm 5 meters to the left of 0. If I'm +5, I'm 5 meters to the right of 0. In both cases, I'm still +5 meters, but I'm 5 meters away from my origin, and that is exactly what absolute value looks at. It looks at the distance away from a starting point or an origin, in most case 0. And what you might notice that if we're always looking at the distance away from 0 or away from an origin, then your answers are going to be positive when you're looking at absolute value. Okay, so very basic understanding, but what are my questions going to look like? Well, to be honest, they're very straightforward. For example, we might have a question that looks like this. Now you might go, hold on, that kind of looks like brackets. What's going on there? These lines here, these vertical lines, they mean the absolute value. So whenever you see these two vertical lines, either side of a number, it's asking you to find the positive value of that number. Because if you think about this again, in relation to the origin of 0, -5 is 5 units to the left of 0. So my answer is 5. Okay, and basically you just look at the answer and you're just trying to make it positive. Obviously they get a little bit more challenging, not too much more though. Like for example, I'll do a second example. Let's say 5 plus the absolute value of -2. Well, that means 5 plus the absolute value of -2 would be +2, so the answer would be 7. We might have one that looks like 5 times the absolute value of -1. Well, the absolute value of -1 is +1, so it's just 5 times 1, which equals 5. So you can start to see that actually this isn't too difficult. Let's do just one more. We'll do the absolute value of -5 minus the absolute value of -4. Well, the absolute value of -5 is +5. The absolute value of -4 is +4. So 5 take away 4 equals 1. Okay, so pretty straightforward. But one actually example that it could be worth looking at actually is they might reverse the question a bit and say the absolute value of x is equal to 4. Find the possible value of x. Well, straight away you might think, oh, x equaled 4, because obviously 4 equals 4. But also, because I'm looking for the absolute value, it could have been -4, because the absolute value of -4 obviously is +4. So in that case, my value of x could be plus or minus 4. It could be either one of these two numbers. So just something to think about. Likewise, you might have the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 10. So the absolute value equals 1 over the other side is take away 1, which equals 9. So the value of x could equal plus or minus 9, because obviously I could put a -9 there, or I could put a +9 there. Okay, so just a little bit different sort of way of looking at it. And that's pretty much it, and that's all I'm pretty much going to go through. I will actually throw in one last thing. And just because what we'll be doing later on, we'll be looking at things like this. Graph the function y equals absolute value of x. I might look at it just very briefly. Because if I look at a table of values, I guess, for x and y values, when x equals -2, y would equal 2, because the absolute value of -2 is +2. When x equals 0, the absolute value of 0 will be 0. When x equals +2, the absolute value of 2 will be +2. And what you might find, or what you will find, is if I draw my x and my y axes like this, if I put -2 there and +2 there, so let's graph this. X equals -2, y equals 2. 0, 0, and 2, 2. And what you will find that it bounces, in this case, off the x-axis. Reflects itself, I guess, through the line x equals 0. But you can see that in this case, because it's always going to be positive for this particular equation or function, you can see it bounces off that x-axis. Again, that's something that we'll look at in the coming weeks, but that's something for you to think about. All right. So look, a very, very basic introduction of absolute value. Just remember, the absolute value is all to do, or talks about the distance away from its origin, or the distance away from starting point, or the distance away from 0. Okay, hope you found it useful. If you're not, ask me some questions.